So hello everyone, I am Ashley Laika Ikirante, and on behalf of Group C, I am going to have a very short introduction about our group members, the topics that were assigned to us, and lastly is the lesson objectives for today's discussion. So the members of the Group C are the following: Herlin Joy Ruelan, Jamaica Lindo, Annalisa Abalar, Angel Kate Caligunan, and yours truly, Ashley Laika Kirante. So the assigned topics are the following: the United Nations, the five organs of United Nations, and the challenges of the United Nations. The lesson objectives for today's discussion are the following: to deeply understand more about the United Nations, to know about the five organs of United Nations and how these organs work or functions, to understand the civil war in Syria and United States sought to invade Iraq in 2001, and lastly is why this too has become a challenge in the United Nations. So, sit back, relax, and listen carefully as the Group C presents the report to all of you.
Good morning. I am Rosaline from Group 3. I am going to discuss to you my topic about the organs of the United Nations. The United Nations was created after World War II. The United Nations is an intergovernmental organization tasked with maintaining international peace and security, developing friendly relations among nations, achieving international cooperation, and being a center for harmonizing the actions of nations. There are five organs of the United Nations. First is General Assembly or GA. General Assembly is the main deliberative organ of the United Nations, comprised of the current 198 member states. It makes decisions to maintain the international peace and security, admitting their new member of the states, and the UN budgets. They are decided by a two-thirds majority. Other matters are decided by a simple majority. Annually, the General Assembly elects a GA president to a one-year term of office. Carlos P. Romulo was elected as GA president in the GS early years on 1949 to 1950. Second is the Security Council or SC, has a primary responsibility under the UN Charter to maintain international peace and security. They determine peace or acts of aggression and resolve it through peaceful or forceful means. The Council has 15 members, including the 5 permanent members or P5, which is China, France, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, and the United States. They're permanent members since the UN's founding and are irreplaceable. The P5 holds great power since only takes one veto vote from a P5 member to stop. The next organ will be discussed to you by the next reporter of our group.
Hello everyone, my name is Annalisa Abalyar, the second presenter of Group C, and now I'm going to discuss about the third and fourth organs of the United Nations. So the third organs of the United Nations is the Economic and Social Council or ECOSOC. It is the UN's principal body for coordinating policy review, policy dialogue, recommendations on social and environmental issues, as well as implementation of internationally agreed development goals. Currently is the UN central platform for discussion of sustainable development. The Council has 54 members, which are chosen for equal geographical representation and serve a 3-year terms. It meets throughout the year and holds a major session in July, during which level meeting of ministers discusses a major economic, social, and humanitarian issues. So the UN Charter established ECOSOC in 1945 and as one of the 6 main organs of the United Nations. Coordination with the UN, ECOSOC links a diverse family of entities organigram dedicated to sustainable development, providing overall guidance and coordination. The entitles include regional economic and social commissions, functional commissions facilitating intergovernmental discussions of major global issues, and specialized agencies, programs, and funds at work around the world to translate development commitments into real changes in people's lives. Partnership with the rest of the world, ECOSOC is gateway for UN partnership and participating with the rest of the world. It offers a unique global meeting point for productive dialogues among policymakers, parliamentarians, academic, foundations, businesses, youth, and 3,200 registered non-governmental organizations. So, ECOSOC serves as the center forum for discussing international economic and social issues and formulating policy recommendations addressed to member states and the United Nations system. So, here is the inside of the ECOSOC chamber. So, the work of ECOSOC involves so many issues, it has many commissions to help it. Some are known as functional commissions. They meet regularly and report back to it on such issues as human rights, social development, the status of women, crime prevention, narcotic drugs, and science and technology. Other regional commissions deal with special problems that people living in different geographical areas face. So ECOSOC has 5 regional commissions that promote economic development and cooperation in the respective regions. So the first is Economic Commission for Africa or EC or ECA. The second is Economic Commission for Europe or EC. And the third is Economic Commission for Latin America and Caribbean or ECLA. Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific or abbreviation is ISCA. And then the fifth is the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia or ESC. So next is the annual ministerial review, which was mandated at the 2005 World Summit, assesses the progress made in the implementation of Millennium Development Goals and the other goals and targets agreed at the major UN conferences and summits over the past 15 years, which constitute the United Nations Development Agenda or UNDA. So when we say Annual Ministerial Review or AMR, it is a function of the Economic and Social Council mandated by heads of state and government at the 2005 World Summit. And its purpose is to assess progress made towards the MDGs and the implementation of the other goals and targets agreed at the major UN conferences summits over the past 15 years, which together constitute the United Nations Development Agenda or UNDA. And then the second is contribute to scaling up and accelerating action to realize that development agenda by serving as global high-level forum with broad-based participation where lessons learned are exchanged and successful practices and approaches that merit scaling up are identified. And AMR was successfully launched in 2007, and in 2010, AMR focused on the eradication of poverty and hunger, and sustainable development, public health, and gender respectively. The theme of the 2011 AMR was implementing the internationally agreed goals and commitments in regard to education. And during roundtable discussion, presentation, and a general debate, participants have the opportunity to learn from leading policymakers, practitioners, and academics. and participants include member states, UN system, organizations, and other major institutional stakeholders, as well as non-governmental organizations, private sector, representative, and academics. So next is the fourth organs is the International Court of Justice or ICJ. So it is the UN's main judicial organ. Its task is to settle legal dispute only between nations and not between individuals. In accordance with international law, legal dispute and submitted to it by states and to give advisory opinions referred to it by authorized United Nations organs and specialized agencies. The International Court of Justice is composed of 15 judges elected to 9-year terms of office by the United Nations General Assembly and the Security Council. So, the International Court of Justice, also known as the World Court, and it is the main judicial organ of the UN. And it established in June 1945 by the Charter of the United Nations and began work in April 1946. So the seat of the court is at the Peace Palace in the Netherlands. And the court's role is to settle, in accordance with the international law, legal dispute submitted to it by states and to give advisory opinions on legal questions referred to it by authorized United Nations organs and specialized agencies. So the court decides dispute between countries based on the voluntary participation of the states concerned. If a state agrees to participate in a proceeding, it is obligated to comply with the court's decision. And the International Court of Justice is composed of 15 judges elected to 9-year terms of office by the United Nations, General Assembly, and the Security Council. And then the court may not include more than one national of the same state. Moreover, the court as a whole must represent the main forms of civilization and principal legal systems of the world. These organs vote simultaneously but separately. In order to be elected, a candidate must receive an absolute majority of the votes in both bodies. This sometimes makes it necessary for a number of rounds of voting to be carried out. So, in order to ensure a measure of continuity, one-third of the court is elected every 3 years. And judges are eligible for re-election. Should a judge die or resign during his or her term of office, a special election is held as soon as possible to choose a judge to fill the unexpired part of the term. So that's the end of my topic. Thank you.
So hello everyone, I am Ashley Laika Ikirante, and for today we will tackle two topics, and that are the last organ of the United Nations and also the challenges that the United Nations faces. So in the past video you have watched, Angel Kit Kaligunan and Annalisa Abalar already discussed and introduced to you the definition of the United Nations and how did UN started, and also they have already discussed the first four organs of the United Nations. So guys, the United Nations has actually five organs, and the last organ is the Secretariat, which will be I discussing today. So what is the Secretariat? So when we say secretariat, it is made up of tens of thousands of international staff members working at the UN headquarters. They are responsible for servicing the other organs of the United Nations and also administering the programs and policies laid down by them. The Secretariat is headed by the Secretary General, who is appointed by the General Assembly, and lastly is that carries out the substantive and administrative work of the United Nations as directed by the General Assembly, the Security Council, and the other organs. So when we say of Secretariat daw po, it is made up of tens of thousands of international staff members. So ito pong Secretariat is marami po talaga siyang mga staff because po United Nations, it means internationally na po talaga siya all around the globe po tong trabaho na ito. So they are responsible for servicing the other organs of the United Nations, which was already discussed to you earlier by the two first reporter of the group. So what are the secretariat functions? So, report on and follow up decisions and actions arising from board and committee meetings, manage board and committee documentations, includes preparing agendas, ensuring documentation adheres to HAPRA style, and that the content is relevant and complete. So, ito pong function ng mga secretariat is para po silang um, department na department or office na nagpa-follow up ng mga decisions after ng mga board and committee meetings kung totoo po ba or final na po ba yung mga decisions na nagawa and nasabi nila during the committee meetings. So what are the roles of Secretariat in the League of Nations? So the Secretariat prepares the agenda and publish reports of meetings. The Council's main function was to settle international disputes. The numbers of permanent and non-permanent members varied, and Council meetings were held in ordinary sessions 4 times a year and as often as needed in extraordinary sessions. So the UN Secretariat carries out the day-to-day work of the UN. UN staff members are recruited internationally and locally. So ito pong secretariat is ang mga staff po nito is nakukuha or nare-recruit all over the world. So kahit saan man pong panig ng mundo is pwede po silang ma-recruit to work in the United Nations. So secretariats are organized along departmental lines, which each departments or offices having a distinct area of action and responsibility. So iyon pong first four organs na na-discuss kanina or earlier is meron po yun silang iba't ibang responsibilities or work sa United Nations. And also when we say secretariat, it is different from a secretary because secretary is someone who is entrusted with a secret while secretariat is the office of a government secretary. So yung secretary po is ang mga secretary po is sila talaga yung nagsusulat ng mga activities ng mga halimbawa po is ng mga boss nila. And when we say of secretariat naman po is this is an office. So yung mga nagsusulat po dito is yung or mga nagdo-document po dito is sila yung tinatawag natin na staffs. Pero ito po secretariat is office po siya ng isang government secretary. So the picture that you are viewing in your screen is the Secretariat building in New York City, where staff of the UN Secretariat carry out the day-to-day work of the UN along with other staffs in New York and UN Secretariat staffs members worldwide. So ito naman po nakikita niyong picture sa ating screen is the Secretariat building in New York City, and dito po yung mga UN Secretariat na nagagawa ng mga day-to-day work ng United Nations. So yan po yung picture ng example of a picture of the Secretariat building in New York City. So the picture naman po na nakikita niyo sa inyong screen is si Antonio Guterres, and he is the 9th Secretary General of the United Nations, and also he took office on January 1st or January 1, 2017. So fun facts po tayo. Much of the UN Secretariat is located in New York City, USA, has 3 major offices outside of its headquarters and 5 regional economic commissions. As of June 30, 2012, the Secretariat had some 43,000 staff members around the world, and also the United Nations, while headquartered in New York, maintains a significant presence in Addis Ababa, Bangkok, Beirut, Geneva, Nairobi, Santiago, and Vienna, and has offices all over the world rather. So ang United Nations naman po, though headquartered sila sa New York, maintains a significant presence pa rin po yung hindi pa rin po nila pinapabayaan yung other offices nila all over the world. So Secretariat is made up of a Secretary General and thousands of UN staffs. Each member carry out the daily duties of the UN and work on international peacekeeping missions. But serving the cause of peace in a violent world is a very dangerous occupation. Since the founding of the UN, hundreds of brave men and women have given or sacrificed their lives in its service. So, since daw po sa pag pag-create ng United Nations, marami na po talagang mga babae at lalaki na handang isakripisyo yung buhay nila just to make the world at peace. So, after discussing the last organ of the United Nations, let us proceed to the challenges faced by the United Nations. And the first problem that the United Nations faces is the non-cooperation of the other states. So when we say the non-cooperation of the other states, the UN was formed because of the voluntary cooperations of the states. If states refuse to cooperate, the influence of the UN can be severely limited. So pag ang UN daw po is nagawa siya because of the voluntary cooperations ng other states. So pag ang states nag-refuse na tumulong sa kanila, syempre, ang impluwensya ng pagtulong ng United Nations is magiging limitado na lang. Yung mga tulong nila na magagawa nila na mas marami pa, is syempre magiging mababa na lang po because wala pong tutulong sa kanila to help other people around the world. So, that is my report, and the second one will be discussed by the next reporter, and she will further explain the problems of the UN. So I hope that you learned something from our discussion for this day, and I am Ashley Laika Ikirante. God bless and thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Herlene Joy S. Rowelan, and for today I will discuss to you the issues in security and peace and Kosovo War. So, the term peace and security is defined as the unity in a nation or state. It can also be defined as the absence of conflict and violence between its citizens. So, the UN Security Council is an international group rooting from the founding of United Nations. So its members are China, Russia, United States, France, and United Kingdom, and they are also called as the P5. So the P5 has something called veto power, which means they can veto or cancel a resolution made by the other members. So next is the Kosovo War. The Kosovo War was an armed conflict in Kosovo that started in February 28 and lasted until June 11, 1999. It was fought by the forces of Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which controlled Kosovo before the war, and the Kosovo Albanian rebel group known as the Kosovo Liberation Army. So the cause of this war was Slobodan Milosevic's oppression against the ethnic Muslim Albanians. The Serbs tried to fend off ethnic Albanians, which caused the displacement of thousands of people. This is a significant war because it caused the displacement of thousands of people and the lasting tension between Serbs and Albanians. So the Kosovo War caused the Borgen Project to be launched. So the Borgen Project is a humanitarian organization and they help thousands of people. And the one who intervened in the war is the NATO, or North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or Atlantic Alliance. So NATO is a military political organization which aims to ensure their members' security and guarantee their freedom using military and political means. So NATO has a total of 30 members, which includes 2 from North America and 28 from Europe. Next is the facts about Kosovo War. The Kosovo War was waged in the Serbian province of Kosovo from 1998 to 1999. Ethnic Albanians living in Kosovo faced the pressure of Serbs fighting for control of the region. Albanians also opposed the government of Yugoslavia, which was made up of modern-day Serbia. Next is Muslim Albanians were the ethnic majority in Kosovo. The president of Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic, refused to recognize the rights of majority because Kosovo was an area sacred to the Serbians. He planned to replace Albanian language and culture with Serbian institutions. Serbian and Yugoslavia forces tried to fight growing KLA support through oppressive tactics and violence. So the government destroyed villages and forced people to leave their homes. They massacred entire villages. Many people fled their homes. So as the conflict grew worse, international intervention rose. The contact group consisting of US, Britain, Germany, France, Italy, and Russia demanded a ceasefire the withdrawal of Yugoslavia and Serbian forces from Kosovo, and the return of refugees. Yugoslavia at first agreed but ultimately failed to implement the terms of the agreement. Next is Yugoslavia and Serbian forces engaged in an ethnic cleansing campaign throughout the duration of the war. By the end of May 1999, 1.5 million of people fled their homes. At that time, that constituted approximately 90% of Kosovo's population. Next is diplomatic negotiation between Kosovo and Serbian delegation began in France in 1999, but Serbian officials refused to cooperate. In response, NATO began a campaign of airstrikes against Serbian targets, focusing mainly on destroying Serbian government buildings and infrastructures. So the bombings caused further flows of refugees into neighboring countries and the deaths of several civilians. Lastly, in June 1999, NATO and Yugoslavia signed a peace accord to end the Kosovo War. The Yugoslav government agreed to troop withdrawal and the return of almost 1 million ethnic Albanians and 500,000 general displaced persons. Unfortunately, tensions between Albanians and Serbs continued into the 21st century. With that, anti-Serbian riots broke out in March 2004 throughout the Kosovo region, and 20 people were killed and over 4,000 Serbians and other minorities were displaced. So overall, the Kosovo War was one of the Europe's most chaotic conflicts, leaving lasting impressions on all those living in the region. So not only has the conflict between coined with the terms genocide and crimes against humanity, but involvement and bombings from NATO also caused widespread controversy. So let's go back to issues in security and peace. So it was said here that China and Russia are against the act and put their veto in the Kosovo War. It's because China and Russia consider the war in Kosovo as an aggressive war against Yugoslavia, a sovereign state which is out of NATO's area. Also, China and Russia perceive that the US reinforced its global supremacy by the war in Kosovo, and with that, they harshly criticize US and NATO. According to them, NATO under the leadership of the US made an air campaign against Yugoslavia without the endorsement of UN Security Council resolution, ignoring objections of China and Russia. And therefore, this was an aggression on a sovereign state out of the NATO's area. With that, China and Russia paid attention to the aspect of the war in Kosovo from the military's viewpoint. They said the war was an asymmetrical war. In other words, a strong military alliance with overwhelmingly superior military power attacked a sovereign state with far less military power. The US and NATO took advantage of having advanced weapons, while Yugoslavia opposed them with older weapons. That's why China and Russia are against it. That's all. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Ge3 the fifth and last reporter of Group C. So today I'm gonna discuss to you the continuation of the second challenges of United Nations, which is the issues in security and peace. So our main objectives here is to understand and elaborate what are the civil war in Syria and United States sought to invade Iraq in 2001 all about, and why this too has become a challenge to the United Nations. So let's start with the civil war in Syria. Civil war in Syria is an ongoing violent conflict between pro-democratic and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's long-standing dynastic regime. Yes po, it's still an ongoing war. The war has been a source of significant instability in the Middle East since 2011, and the resultant civilian displacement and refugee exodus constitute one of the worst humanitarian crises in modern history. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is the 19th president of Syria since July 17, 2000. He is an ally of Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. In 2012, Assad confirmed for the first time its possession of chemical weapon arsenal. Syria threatened to deploy chemical weapons against foreign aggressors but stressed that it would never use them on civilians. It is a weapon used to protect its country from the enemy or foreign enemy and said that they won't use it to the civilians. However, numerous multinational investigations have uncovered Syrian chemical weapons attack and targeted Syrian civilians. Although they stated that they won't and never use them on the civilians, some investigators found out that they use those chemical weapons to attack its own civilians, the Syrian civilians. The Syrian government strongly denies having used any chemical weapons. So because of this, the United Nations made a resolution which is the UN Security Council Resolution 2118. It is about the agreement to eliminate Syria's chemical weapons. Syrian government is accused of carrying out chemicals, which is chlorine gas, attacks on its civilian. And as I've said earlier, it is a charge it denies. An image of how a chlorine gas irritates people's eye and skin and can burn the lungs. The report said that Syrian Air Force helicopters had dropped chlorine gas on rebel-held areas, twice in March 2015 and once in April 2014. Russia has threatened to veto any SC or Security Council resolution against Syria. So, the forbid, no? Meaning, whomever tries to file a resolution against Syria, they will forbid it. They will be against it, kumbaga. So, aside from Russia, China also have vetoed a UN resolution to impose sanction on Syria over the alleged use of chemical weapons. They actually have a reason for this, on why they vetoed or why are they against on the UN resolution against Syria. So Russian President Putin said that the sanction against Syria is totally inappropriate and would only undermine confidence, meaning or the Syria will only look less powerful and weak if they go on with the UN resolution. Meanwhile, China's UN ambassador said that it was too early to reach a final conclusion on who carried out the chemical attacks. So that's the reason on why they vetoed on the UN resolution. The UN is again ineffectual amid a conflict, meaning they couldn't able to find a way to stop or put the war on end. That has led to over 220,000 people dead and 11 million displaced. And as of December 2020, more than 500,000 people have been killed or are missing. 387,118 are documented deaths, while 205,300 people are missing and are pre-assumed dead. This is according to Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. So now let us proceed to the last topic, which is the United States sought to invade Iraq in 2001. It is claimed that Iraq's Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction that threatened the world. Saddam Hussein is Iraq's dictator. He rules through fear and has a track record of using chemicals and biological weapons against both his own population and during Iran-Iraq War in 1980s. Please take note that he rules through fear. The 9/11 terror attacks on the 11th of September 2001 shook the whole world. Al-Qaeda's terrorists hijacked U.S. passenger planes and flew them into both World Trade Centers in New York and Washington. Almost 3,000 people were killed. But a question here is, it was the Al-Qaeda terrorists who hijacked and launched the 9/11 terror attack on the U.S. But why did the U.S. invade or go after the Iraq? Well, it wasn't that the Iraq had a hand in 9/11. It was the fear that Iraq could have a hand in the next 9/11 because, as I've stated, they have the use of weapons of mass destruction. The primary rationalization for the Iraq War was articulated by a joint resolution of the United States Congress known as Iraq Resolution. In November of 2002, the UN passed Resolution 1441, which is giving Saddam one last chance to give up his weapon of mass destruction. But the tricky part is, he didn't have any. He wants people to believe that he's running or he has the hold of this weapon and he's developing it, as it gives the impression of he is a man of power. Remember that Saddam ruled through fear, and the idea that he had weapons of mass destruction was a major part of that. He allowed inspectors into the country under Resolution 1441, but without being fully compliant, meaning he's not being supportive and is not willing to comply, to cooperate with the inspectors. For the US, that gave cause for a war, but the United States Security Council still remained unconvinced. They couldn't make a decision and still in doubt. Russia, China, and France were unconvinced and vetoed the UN resolution for intervention, meaning they are against the resolution which is giving Saddam a chance to give up a weapon of destruction, because those three countries think that Saddam don't have any weapons of mass destruction. So the image shows the UN or the United Nations Weapons Inspector in Iraq doing an inspection regarding the mass destruction or weapon of mass destruction. With the United Nations in the middle, Spain, Britain, United States are working to build coalition to support military action, while France, Germany, Russia, and more are opposed to military action. So this has really become a challenge to the United Nations in terms of issues in security and peace. So that's the end of our video presentation. I hope you've learned a lot. On behalf of my group mates, thank you for listening and watching. Have a good day, everyone.